What up, you fluffy bastards? My name is Liquid Blitz, and today we are looking in specific hardcore detail at what is the exact difference and which is better between the vertical foregrip and the angled foregrip in PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. The in-game descriptions are not only useless, but actually completely wrong. These descriptions are absolute bullsniff. Totally wrong. And if you go searching online for this information, there are multiple websites and forum posts, etc. with contradicting or old information. So the meat of this video is going to be in my own testing, which you're going to see on screen in a series of side-by-side comparison tests. Starting with an aim-down sight speed test with very slow-mo comparisons to make it as clear as crystal. Then I will do a side-by-side recoil test showing the differences in vertical and horizontal recoil between the two grips and also no grip at all. And I'll do that for each weapon that can actually equip the grips. So in other words, a whole bunch of tests. Okay, first things first, just in case you don't want to stick around to watch the tests and the comparisons, and you just want the answer like that, I will tell you immediately what the vertical and angled foregrips actually do according to my testing and my research. Okay, let's start with the vertical foregrip. The vertical grip can be used by the M416, the SCAR-L, the UMP, and the Vector, 4 weapons in total. It gives you 15 to 20% less vertical recoil. That's 15 to 20% less upwards movement. Fantastic. It also gives you 15 to 20% less horizontal recoil as well, which means less sideways movement. And finally, the vertical grip gives you a faster aim-down sight speed with the SCAR, the UMP, and the Vector, but not the M416. Don't believe me? Stick around for the tests. Anyway, let's move on to the angled grip. The angled grip can be used by the M416, the SCAR-L, and the UMP. Special note here, the Vector cannot equip the angled grip, only the vertical. Now, the angled foregrip has no effect on vertical recoil. It doesn't reduce the vertical recoil whatsoever, according to my calculations. There was one single exception in the testing, and that was the SCAR, with which the angled foregrip had 4% less vertical recoil. But testing conditions across the board are not perfect, and doing sort of complex calculations based on screen space distance is theoretically flawed even to begin with, but it's the best we can do without official information. So ignoring that one anomaly with the SCAR, it has no effect on vertical recoil whatsoever. It does, however, have measurably reduced horizontal recoil, with all my tests' results varying between 6 and 14%. But obviously, they wouldn't use such strange values, so I've just rounded it to between 5 and 15% less horizontal recoil. The point is the angled grip does reduce horizontal recoil by the same or slightly less than the vertical foregrip. And finally, the angled grip also does aim down sight faster as well. This time, it does aim down sight faster for the M416, whereas the vertical grip didn't. And it also aims down sight faster for the SCAR and the UMP as well. And of course, it can't be equipped on the Vector, so that's not included in this. So, now you know what they do. Which should you use? Which should you choose? Well, I'm not sure if they've made some mistakes or they've overlooked something. The game is in early access at the moment, so it's very possible that the grips and most attachments aren't actually functioning correctly. But right now, as I make this right now, the vertical grip completely wipes the floor with the angled grip. I mean, according to my tests, which you'll see next, only the vertical foregrip actually affects vertical recoil, and vertical recoil is such a big deal. They do both affect horizontal recoil, but as you'll see in the tests, even the horizontal left and right sort of recoil is better, slightly, with the vertical foregrip. And as for the final points, aiming down sight faster, they both aim down sight faster than without a grip, with the exception that for some reason the vertical grip doesn't speed up the M416's ADS, and I don't know why. So right now, the vertical foregrip is the 100% winner between the two, and no one should be using the angled. I mean, that being said, obviously the angled is better than no grip at all, but as soon as you get the choice, switch to the vertical foregrip. Anyway, let's move on. All you've seen so far are friendly facts and sexy stats, so right now I'm going to double down on all of my unfounded statements with evidence and facts so that you can see clearly for yourself the difference between the two foregrips. So let's get straight into it. First, let's start by testing and comparing the aim down sight speeds when using a vertical foregrip, an angled foregrip, and no foregrip at all. We're starting with the M416, and I've made this as easy as possible for you guys to see the difference. On the left, we have no foregrip at all attached. In the middle, we have the vertical foregrip attached, and on the right, we have the angled foregrip. Same weapon, same position, same spot, same frame rate, which is important because to see the difference, we have to go right down to individual frames. I'm replaying it slower and slower so it's easier to see, and I'm also pausing it at certain telltale moments where it's obvious what the difference is. I mean, there it is. Clearly, the angled grip for the M416 is faster at aiming than the vertical and no grip. But only just. You literally have to slow it down to checking it frame by frame to see the difference. The time difference is so tiny that it almost makes no difference, so unless you're some kind of hardcore superhuman with the reactions of a fox, the decision to choose which grip to use for the M416 falls to the recoil difference between the two, which we'll get to later. Anyway, next up is the Scar L. As you can see, it's a different story completely with the Scar. Both the vertical and angled grips both aim faster than having no grip at all, and they seem to be just as fast as one another. So for the Scar, the vertical grip aims faster, and for the M416, it doesn't, and the angled grip so far aims faster for both. So let's move on to the third weapon, the UMP. Once again, we can see the aim down sight is faster for both the vertical grip and the angled grip, so it's looking so far like the M416 is an anomaly with aim speed. And when it comes to anomalies, more testing is better, so let's move on to the final weapon, the Vector. As I said before, you can't put the angled grip on the Vector, only the vertical foregrip, but we can at least check if the vertical grip aims down sight faster or not. And there you have it. I mean, yes, it does aim down sight faster. That's it for the aim down sight speed tests. Both the vertical foregrip and the angled foregrip seem to aim down sight faster than with no grip at all. And they seem to speed it up by the same amount. The one exception in our test is the M4, where the vertical foregrip seems to have no effect on aim speed. Whether this is just an oversight or a mistake, I mean, I have no idea. I mean, just keep in mind, as I said before, the game is still in early access, so it's probably a mistake. Anyway, now for the big one, the meat and bones, recoil. Let's do the exact same side-by-side comparison for recoil for each weapon. And we'll go in the same order, starting with the M416. The side-by-side order is also the same as before. We have no grip on the left, we have the vertical foregrip attached in the middle, and we have the angled on the right. Okay, at the end of each recoil test, I've done this. I've made a nice little analysis screen. Now this might look overwhelming, so let's simplify it. The red line across the bottom is the vertical starting point of each recoil test, so we can line each test up nicely. The green arrow is the horizontal starting point and shows the exact spot of the first bullet. The big blue boxes represent the full range of recoil, both horizontal and vertical, with a yellow border just for extra clarity. As you can see right off the bat, on the left-hand side, having no foregrip at all is just worse in every way. The highest vertical recoil, and it goes both left and right in large amounts. Complete pants, as expected. The vertical foregrip, however, in the middle, looks awesome. The first thing you notice is that it has the lowest vertical upwards recoil by far, which is why it's favoured by most people. It also has the lowest horizontal recoil, which I found surprising. When I first did these tests, I was under the illusion that the angled foregrip had better horizontal recoil and the vertical foregrip had better vertical recoil, but apparently the vertical foregrip is better in both worlds. The angled foregrip on the right, as you can see, has the same upwards recoil as having no grip attached whatsoever. And the horizontal recoil is a bit better than no grip, but still not as good as having the vertical foregrip attached. So to conclude this one, for the M416, the vertical foregrip clearly has better recoil across the board. But keep in mind that the M416 is the aim down sight speed anomaly, and only the angled grip aims down sight faster for this weapon. Now let's move on to the Scar. Once again, no grip is worse, clearly, in every way, and also, once again, the vertical foregrip just stands out as being immediately awesome, with a much lower vertical recoil and the lowest horizontal recoil. Now, do you remember back when I said the SCAR was the one exception, when I said the angled grip has no effect on vertical recoil? Well, this is the test that gave me that exception. As you can see on the right for the angled grip, the upwards distance is less than with no grip attached at all, so maybe the angled grip does actually affect vertical recoil. But if it does, it's a very tiny amount compared to the vertical foregrip. And something else that's important to note for the angled foregrip on the SCAR specifically is, while the overall horizontal recoil isn't that much better than having no grip attached, pay close attention to the recoil pattern. Look at the line of dots for no grip and angled grip. If you look on the right, I personally think the pattern of the bullets is more predictable, and therefore better with the angled foregrip where the bullets mostly go to the right, whereas with no grip at all on the left, all the bullets sort of go left and right kind of equally. So that's just interesting to note, that while the angled foregrip doesn't have as good of a recoil impact as the vertical foregrip, the pattern, the recoil pattern, does seem to be better than having no grip at all. Anyway, next up, the UMP. For a third time, the recoil with the vertical foregrip attached just stands out immediately. Clearly the best. This time round, the angled grip has no effect on vertical recoil at all. You can see it's the same height as with no grip. And the horizontal recoil, once again, is by far the best with the vertical foregrip attached. So far, the vertical foregrip is just kicking ass. Also, once again, keep in mind that both foregrips aim down sight faster for the SCAR and the UMP. So if they aim just as fast as each other, then the only other factor is recoil, and the vertical foregrip is hands down just the best for every weapon so far. So as of yet, I really don't see any reason to choose the angled grip. The vertical grip is just dominating. So finally, the Vector. Let's watch. Of course, as we already mentioned, you can't equip the angled grip on a Vector, so we can only compare the recoil between no grip and the vertical foregrip. And the results completely fall in line with what we've come to expect. The vertical foregrip gives much less vertical recoil, and again also has less sideways movement as well. This Vector test is a bit superfluous really, because, I mean, it can only attach the vertical foregrip, so whenever you find one you're going to equip it regardless. But it's nice to see just how much it does affect the recoil. Anyway, that's it for the recoil tests, and that's it for all the testing. Just so you know, I did all the tests that I've included in this video. I did 2 or 3 times for each weapon, just to make sure I got the same results, and the results were the same for each test. If you're still here right at the end of the video, you are awesome! And you've seen yourself now that the vertical foregrip just wins, hands down, when it comes to recoil, both vertical and horizontal recoil. You've also seen that when it comes to ADS speeds, both grips give you a faster aim speed, with the one exception, that the vertical grip on the M416 doesn't. But it's odd that that is the one exception, so that's probably a mistake by the developers. The best we can say for the angled foregrip is that it seems to have a potentially better general recoil pattern, with the bullets firing in a more predictable direction and pattern. But even then, the vertical foregrip reduces horizontal recoil by so much that you don't really need the extra predictability from the angled, unless you're firing sort of fully automatic and at medium range, and you shouldn't be doing that anyway. So my overall conclusion is that the vertical foregrip is the winner, and just the best choice in every single situation. But if you really, really love having a slightly faster aim down sight time over having a better recoil, then for the M416 the angled might be the better choice, because only the angled aims faster for that weapon. Anyway, I hope you found this useful and interesting. Like this video if you liked it, like this video if you didn't like it, and catch me in the next video. Liquid Blitz out!